top 10 transfer portal additions in the SEC for 2024? Well, today, let's go ahead and rank them. Welcome on into SEC Unfiltered. It's Cole Thompson here. Make sure that you like the video, hit the ring notification, and smash that subscribe button because we talk college football every single day. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Follow us on the socials, link in the description. Follow me at Mr. Cole Thompson on Twitter and Instagram, and check out all of our great work found at SECUnfiltered.com. This episode is fueled by Fanduel. Visit fanduel.com/SECU to join today on the action and get started with $200 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. So you lay down $5, you win that bet, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets, and it's in your pocket immediately. What's not to love? Go visit fanduel.com/SECU to join in the chaos today. And by the way, if you want to watch any of our other top 10 videos, the link will be right up here. So this was a very challenging list to come up with because number one, there was chaos in the transfer portal last year. Over 400 new players joined the 16 teams in the conference, including Texas and Oklahoma now joined the conference. And number two, there were some really solid seasons, very overall standout play that we just can't list all of them. So I had two criteria. Number one, you had to be a transfer portal edition of 2024. So if you transferred in 2022 or 2023, congratulations on having all your success, but you didn't qualify for this list. And number two, it's my list. I have different criteria than you. If you want to argue with me, just go ahead and drop your top 10 in the comment section down below. As always, we start off with our honorable mentions. The guys just left on the outside looking in: Ole Miss linebacker Chris Paul, Vanderbilt tight end Eli Stowers, Texas A&M cornerback Will Lee, Ole Miss defensive back Trey Amos, Mississippi State wide receiver Kevin Coleman, Arkansas running back Jaquindon Jackson, Texas pass rusher Trey Moore, South Carolina linebacker Demetrius Knight, Texas A&M defensive back B.J. Mays, Missouri linebacker Corey Flagg, Mississippi State linebacker Stone Blanton, and Arkansas quarterback Taylon Green. Just want to give you a shout out because you probably deserve it. Now let's move into our top 10. Number 10, Auburn wide receiver KeAndre Lambert-Smith. And KeAndre was one of those dudes that I said when he joined the Plains, it all is going to matter on quarterback play. Leaves a really terrible situation out in State College where he wasn't able to flourish as the Nittany Lions' number one receiver, and he doesn't really get better quarterback play down at Auburn. But he delivered on his end. One of the more slept-on playmakers in college football this past year, 18 yards shy of becoming the first Auburn wide receiver since Y2K to total 1,000 yards in a season, and the best season from an Auburn wide receiver since Darvin Adams in 2009. He had 4 100-yard performances, including the Iron Bowl and the Arkansas game. He ranked top 3 in the SEC in yards per catch with 19.1. He was top 5 in receiving yards with 981, number 2 in yards per game with 81.8, and number 2 in wide receiver touchdowns by a playmaker in the SEC. The best thing of all when it came to KeAndre Lambert-Smith was he took pressure off of the young guys. Perry Thompson, Cam Coleman, Malcolm Simmons, they're all expected to be the differences in this offense next year, along with newcomer Eric Singleton. But they got a year to be able to really kind of get their feet wet, understand what was the ins and outs of the offense in college football. And KeAndre was always a dude that Peyton Thorne or Holden Griner or whoever was the starting quarterback needed a big-time play. There he was downfield for 6 points. It only really stinks that he didn't get to go on a college football playoff run because the team that he left eventually went to the college football playoff semifinals. And also, he just didn't get to go to a bowl game. But he is going to be remembered down in Auburn for having an incredible season. He's going to go down as one of the better one-year rentals for the program. And ultimately, I think he's going to have a stellar NFL career. Number 9, Rocket Sanders, South Carolina. The blast-off was back in action at Willie B in 2024. Not only did Sanders finish top 5 in rushing attempts per game with 19.5, he was also top 10 in the SEC in rushing touchdowns with 11, top 3 in the SEC with rushing yards with 881. And best of all, we got to see the explosiveness that was missing in Fayetteville in 2023 back in Cola. This is why we fell in love with Rocket Sanders and knew that he could be one of the better running backs in college football. And the second that he was paired with Lenore Sellers, it was like everything was back in action. It was KJ Jefferson 2.0. And he stepped on up in some of the biggest games for South Carolina en route to a record-setting year down in Willie B. 213 yards against 2 touchdowns against LSU, 238 yards with 3 touchdowns against Texas A&M, 2 touchdowns, my apologies, 3 touchdowns and 178 yards against Vanderbilt, got the game-winning score with less than a minute on the clock against Missouri, without a guy like Rocket Sanders being the number 2 option opposite of Lenore Sellers. What does this offense look like? And we watched it. If Sanders plays in the game against Illinois, are we sure that South Carolina doesn't win by 10? Doesn't win by 20? Maybe even 30 points? That's how big of an impact he was. I think Rasul Faison coming on in from Utah State is going to carry on the torch. But just having Rocket Sanders showed you what the identity of what South Carolina needs to be moving forward. Ground and pound, physicality. And by the way, if you get into the open field, go ahead and blast off for 6 points. Number 8, Princely Umanmielen from Ole Miss. One of the more underappreciated defensive ends in college football this past year because he was very limited. Didn't start the season, was on the injured reserve or what was going to be the injured report for Ole Miss. But when he came on the field, dude, impact. Like, you know, when you see your one friend that comes on out like once in a blue moon and you're always partying, it's like 2 a.m. and then he's always getting into trouble, but it's for good reasons. Like, it's a night that you're going to remember. Every performance from Princely U was one to remember. 2 sacks against Georgia in one of the biggest wins for Lane Kiffin's career. 2 sacks against Arkansas. 2 sacks against Oklahoma, both on third down against Jackson Arnold in Ole Miss's territory. He was a difference maker for one of the better pass rushes in the SEC this past season, and he took a lot of pressure off of the interior and the secondary to have to make plays. This was a guy that you could buy a lot of stock into. Finished number 2 in the SEC with 10.5 sacks. Finished number 3 in the SEC with 14 tackles for losses. On top of that, he was the anchor on the edge for the number 2 run defense in the country. And his little brother, Prince Will Umanmielen, is coming on in next year, and he's going to be here for multiple years, going to carry on the tradition of what is you coming off the edge and probably punishing you, the quarterback, into the ground and into oblivion. Number 7, Andrew Makuba for Texas. Texas's secondary was awful in 2023. If you go back and actually take the secondary of this year with the unit on offense last year, and you also throw in probably Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat, that is the national champion. I stand on that. This was the 116th ranked secondary in college football, and it cost him a shot at going to the national championship and joining the SEC as actual championship mentality as a Big 12 team. So you bring in Andrew Makuba, and immediately you see results. Goes from 116th in the country to number 1 in the country. And Makuba was a human highlight reel, was a standout at Clemson for multiple years, dealt with some injuries, wanted to come back closer to home. The Austinite delivered on every end of the spectrum, finished with 11 pass breakups, 69 total tackles, 5 interceptions, which was tied for the SEC lead with teammate Jahdae Barron. And he was an enforcer. This was a leader that Steve Sarkisian needed. The type of player that when you bring in from the portal, you say, hey, you're going to fit our culture almost perfectly. And then he looks at you and says, no. You're going to fit my standard almost instantly. And the two just worked together like biscuits and gravy. It was a phenomenal pairing. It was why Texas was able to once again punch its ticket to the SEC championship, punch its ticket to multiple college football playoff victories, and eventually at least hold its own against one of the better offensive personnels in Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. Yes, I know what the score says, but don't pay attention to that. If only Andrew Makuba had one more year. Texas is going to be fine on the back end. They're going to be fine defensively with guys like Anthony Hill and Trey Moore and Colin Simmons back. But just to know that you had Andrew Makuba as your security blanket and also as a heat-seeking missile flying down the football field with ease, you knew that you were in good standing. Number 6, Jermod McCoy from Tennessee. Tennessee was a lot like Texas. So UT, but both had questions with their secondaries. No doubt about what the front seven was. Everyone had a good feeling about what James Pierce and what Tim Banks were going to be able to scheme on up, but you needed that enforcer on the back end. That was number 3, the Oregon State transfer. Not only finished with 13 pass breakups, which was the most by a Tennessee defender since 2021, but he also finished with 4 interceptions, which was the 3rd most among all SEC defensive backs and the most by a Tennessee defender since 2019. Here is the selling point when you look at a guy like Jermod McCoy. 3 of his interceptions came from within the red zone. So on scoring opportunities for opposing teams to be able to punch it on in and take advantages against Tennessee's defense, there was number 3 getting a turnover and giving the ball right back to the offense to go ahead and make magic. He is one of the more explosive, physical, I think overall fluid cornerbacks in college football. He does a great job of mirroring number 1 wide receivers. Last season graded out with the number 1 coverage grade among all SEC defensive backs with a 90.3. Actually, number 2, only behind Jahdae Barron. So my apologies on that one. He is going to be the number 1 returning cornerback for coverage grade by Pro Football Focus. And in my opinion, he and a guy like Nico Iamaleava are the perfect pairing on offense and defense as your duo to lead your team to new heights going into 2025 and beyond. Tennessee's not slowing down. I have no idea where the narrative about Tennessee taking a step back in 2025 is coming from, but they still have a solid defense. You got Jermod McCoy stepping on up to be your go-to dude in next season. Nico's going to improve. I think Rocky Top is going to be rolling and probably hosting a playoff game. Super Bowl 59, one game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with Fanduel Sportsbook. Whether you're predicting the first touchdown, who will take home the MVP trophy, or the coin toss, Fanduel makes it easy to place your bets and feel the thrill of every moment. With live betting all game long, you can jump into the action, adjust your bets, and ride the wave of excitement from kickoff to the final whistle. Plus, to make the Super Bowl even sweeter, new customers can score $200 when you make your first bet. Just place a $5 bet, and if you win, you get $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head on over to fanduel.com/SECU and bet with Fanduel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Disclaimer, must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus in DC. First online real money wager only, $5 first deposit required. Bonus issue with non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expires 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE NY in New York. Okay, back to the show. Now let's go to number 5. These are my top 5. If you want to switch number 5 and number 4, I would have zero argument whatsoever. But number 5 for me is Diego Pavia. Baba Yaga, the ultimate underdog story. This was a kid that has been doubted his entire life and was even doubted by some in the media landscape when he was at Vanderbilt. Go back to the preseason and listen to some of the people that work in this field and ask about, is it going to be Pavia, not even Pavia, Pavia, or Nate Johnson as the starting quarterback in Nashville? Kid goes and has to go to a junior college, then goes to a Conference USA school, marches on into Auburn, Alabama, and Lynchburg, Virginia, and beats Hugh Freeze twice, takes his team to a conference title game, leaves with his offense coordinator Tim Beck to Nashville, and proceeds to have one of the best seasons in over a decade for Vanderbilt football. Beats Alabama, beats Auburn, won on the road, becomes the owner of the Yellowhammer State, finishes with over 3,000 total yards of offense, 28 total touchdowns, and on top of that, a passer rating and a career high of 157.5, changes the identity and the culture of what we know out in Nashville. There's a reason why there are expectations going into 2025 for the Commodore country, because they got number 2 back, and they got Eli Stowers back, and it's the same offensive identity. And when you play with a persona that we know that we're going to be doubted, but we don't care, we believe internally we're the kings of college football, that will carry a lot of weight. I'm not going to say that Vanderbilt's going to go on this epic run to the college football playoff or punch their ticket into the SEC championship. But expectations now with Diego Pavia coming on back is at least get to 7 wins, potentially even 8 or 9, and continuing the tradition of anchoring down and being better than advertised. Number 4 is Nick Scourton. Again, if you want to switch these two, not a really big problem. College Station native, Bryan, Texas native, actually, if we're being completely honest, goes to Purdue, becomes the the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year last year, joins Mike Elko's squad, doesn't miss a beat, finishes top 3 in tackles for losses with 14, leads Texas A&M with 5 sacks. His 10 tackles for losses against SEC opponents was number 1 among all qualified defensive ends in the conference. 8 of those sacks came against ranked opponents. So it was in the biggest games as well, going up against some of the better offensive linemen, including All-American Will Campbell, including Emory Jones from LSU. His ability to pressure quarterbacks into making mistakes opened up plays for Cassius Howell and for Shamar Stewart and for Shamar Turner, and that allowed Texas A&M's front 7 to make up for the losses that were happening on the back end in the secondary. So a ton of issues that were going on for Texas A&M in year 1 for Mike Elko were somewhat mitigated because of what you have with guys like Nick Scourton coming off at the edge. And this is now the type of player that you have to go after if you are Mike Elko. We need enforcers, dudes, studs, and talented playmakers who are going to be yes sirs, going to the football and making plays left and right. He's going to be a first-round pick, and if he's not a first-round pick, he's definitely going to be a high-end number 2 pick. He was one of the best defensive linemen in the SEC this past year. Probably could have came back for another season and helped Texas A&M actually live up to expectations with the 10-2 record. But Cassius Howell is going to have to take on over and be the enforcer off the edge. Number 3, Matthew Golden. And a lot of people are going to say, why is Golden so high? Because you're not in the national championship picture without Matthew Golden. Because he leaves Houston. He's the afterthought down in Austin. Remember when we were going through all of the wide receivers that left Texas and then joined Texas. Isaiah Bond, Silas Bolden. You have Ryan Wingo coming on in from St. Louis. You still have Jonte Cook on the roster. And you say, Matthew Golden, he's a guy. He can help out on special teams. No, he was just special for the team, is what you probably should have said. Led the roster with over 900 receiving yards, stepped on up in every single major game, including a 162-yard performance in the SEC Championship, 146-yard performance, and the game-tying touchdown against Arizona State in the college football playoff quarterfinals. He also had a big-time performance against Georgia in the first matchup down in Austin. He was Mr. Consistency. You needed a play for Quinn Ewers. Guess who was there? Number 2. By the season's end, I was starting to call him King Midas because everything that he touched turned to gold. And a big reason why Texas' offense was able to flourish was because they were starting to double-team Matthew Golden. They realized that if we take away 2, we're going to have a shot. But you didn't, because there was Gunnar Helm, and there was Ryan Wingo, and there was Silas Bolden, and there was, of course, you have Isaiah Bond, and you throw Quinn Weisner out of the backfield and Jaden Blue. There was a lot to like about this team. But Matthew Golden's impact, especially in the college football playoff run, will forever be remembered down in Texas. And for Quinn Ewers, part of the reason why he was once again able to punch his ticket to another 3,000-yard season, becoming one of 4 quarterbacks since 2000 to have over 3,000 passing yards, was he had a number 1 weapon. That's Matthew Golden. He's going to flourish in the NFL next year. Nobody gained more draft stock probably on the offensive side of the football than him. And I can't wait to see what he does in the right system for our Sunday team. Number 2. Walter Nolen. Walter Nolen is the perfect epitome of when you have to leave a bad situation to get a fresh start. We've all been there before, whether it's a bad relationship, whether it's just a terrible job, and we get an opportunity to go elsewhere in life. And we say, let's hit the reset button, because I know this is not the best version of me. You're right. It wasn't the best version of Walter Nolen down at Texas A&M. But the second that he joined Pete Golden's system, yeah, best of luck to you. Not only was he the anchor of the number 2 run defense in the country, he was also one of the only big-time impacts at defensive tackle. Tied for top 3 in the SEC with 14 tackles for losses, led all SEC defensive tackles with 6.5 sacks. The number 1 interior defensive lineman, according to Pro Football Focus, in pass rush win rate and in pressures. Also number 2 in quarterback hits in the country. He was an All-American and the 14th consensus All-American in program history down in Oxford, and a big reason why this team got to 10 wins once again underneath Lane Kiffin. This was the number 1 defensive prospect coming out in 2022 of that historic Texas A&M class. And a lot of people kind of forgot about him because of he wasn't properly utilized in the right system for DJ Durkin's unit or whatever Jimbo Fisher wanted to run. So you go ahead and you land out in a new location. And everyone who said, is the number 1 defensive prospect? No. You change it to the tone, which is a very big deal. Oh, that guy's the number 1 defensive prospect. I see why. First round pick on the horizon. Definitely going to be an all-impact player for whatever defense he plays for next season. Walter Nolen lived up to every expectation that you could have imagined out in Hottie Toddy land. But number 1, this was my number 1 defensive player. This was arguably my number 1 player in the SEC this past year. It was Kyle Kennard. Kyle Kennard did everything and anything for South Carolina and will go down, in my opinion, as one of the greatest one-year rental transfers for a program that did not make the college football playoff. Because unfortunately, they couldn't punch their way in at the number 12 seed. But just keep this in mind. Very similar to what I said about KeAndre Lambert-Smith and Rocket Sanders, you could say about Kyle Kennard. He took pressure off of Dylan Stewart. Stewart's going to be a household name in college football by this time next season. All-American, top 10 accolades, top 10 in quarterback pressures, QB hits, tackles for losses, everything. But he didn't have to be that guy this year because the Georgia Tech transfer said, I'll take over that role. Let me be the enforcer. You be the Robin. We together will be a dynamic duo that will carry this defense to new heights and have Willie B rocking and rolling on Saturday nights. And he did. Led the SEC in tackles. Number 2 in the SEC in tackles for losses. Number 1 in total sacks, 3 forced fumbles. His single season sack total ranked 2nd in school history, only behind Jadeveon Clowney's 2012 year. And on top of that, he won the Bronco Nagurski Trophy for the number 1 defensive player in college football. And he was the SEC Defensive Player of the Year by coaches in the AP poll. Everything that you could have imagined for Kyle Kennard coming into Columbia, South Carolina was as advertised. No doubt about it. This was the dude that defined what South Carolina football is. And now he's going to be able to represent South Carolina at the highest honor on the NFL on Sundays. But those are my top 10 transfer portal additions for 2024. Let me know in the comments section down below. Who was I too high on? Who was I too low on? Who are your top 10 transfer portal additions? Like, review, hit subscribe. Make sure you're following us on all the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Follow me at Mr. Cole Thompson and check out all of our great work found at SECUnfiltered.com. Until next time, folks, I am Cole Thompson. Just remember, the transfer portal is made to better your roster, and these rosters are better because of the 10 ahead. Peace.